I know was traditional country music, what George preached and sang, well, there's something missing in today's country music.
Gene Watson was one of the greatest voices country music ever produced. A singer so good that legends admired him. Fans memorized every word. And yet, somehow, he never became the household name many believed he deserved. From sleeping in a converted school bus and picking cotton as a child to scoring hit after hit on the country charts, Gene Watson built his career the hard way. But behind the timeless songs was a life marked by devastating setbacks, crushing loss, a career-threatening legal battle, a fight against cancer, and heartbreak that struck again and again when he least expected it. At 82 years old, Gene Watson is still standing, but the price he paid to get here is almost impossible to believe. The making of Gene Watson. Gary Gene Watson was born on October 11, 1943, in Palestine, Texas, a small town that would always hold a piece of his heart. He was one of 7 children, and his early life was marked by the kind of poverty that most people cannot imagine. His father remodeled an old school bus to provide living quarters and transportation for the family as they moved from job to job, traveling wherever the cotton fields called them. They moved around Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, living in makeshift homes and battling hunger and instability. From the age of 6, Gene worked alongside his siblings, digging potatoes and picking cotton to help put food on the table. The work was grueling, but amidst the back-breaking labor, music bloomed. His mother strummed gospel hymns on the guitar, and young Gene absorbed every note like a prayer. He remembered singing as much as he remembered talking. Music was not a career. It was a lifeline, a way to escape the harsh realities of poverty and find something beautiful in an otherwise difficult world. By the time he was 12 years old, Gene had permanently dropped out of school. The decision was not made lightly, but necessity demanded it. He took a full-time job at a local auto salvage yard, jumping straight off the school bus to clean and harvest engine parts. His love for cars and trucks had begun when he got a job picking up scrap metal at a car junkyard. He worked long hours, dirty and tired, but he never complained. He was helping his family survive. Moving to Houston in 1961, Gene lived in extreme financial instability. He constantly packed up and moved his family from one cheap apartment to another, surviving completely hand-to-mouth. He developed a brutal daily routine that would define his early adulthood. He worked 10 to 12 hours as a professional auto body repairman, sander, and painter during the day, before spending his nights performing in violent Texas honky-tonks to generate extra income. He lived a double life, and the grind was exhausting. He formed his first notable regional underground band, which he named after his worn-down Ford car. The name Hailball was a localized Texas slang term for hailstones. The band played wherever they could, building a local following through sheer determination and talent. Gene never intended to pursue music professionally. He saw it as a hobby, a way to relax after long hours in the garage. But his life changed when the famous country duo the Wilburn Brothers randomly watched him sing at a Houston club. They were so impressed that they urged him to record commercially. They took him to Nashville for the first time and allowed him to sing on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. He sang a Hank Williams song and got a standing ovation. Not knowing what to follow, he went out and did a gospel standard. The experience convinced him that he could make a living with his voice. Gene signed to Wide World Records and later co-founded Resco Records, which stood for Record Service Company, with his partner Russ Reader. He eventually bought out Reader to own the entire catalog. He released his first single in 1962, but success was elusive. For more than a decade, he performed in local clubs at night, while continuing to work in a Houston auto body shop during the day. He was a working-class man who happened to sing. In 1975, after years of obscurity, Gene's single, "Love in the Hot Afternoon," finally blew up. Capitol Records picked up the regional single and released it nationally. The title track, a sultry ballad in three-quarter time, climbed to number 3 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart. After a 14-year grueling underground grind, Gene Watson had finally arrived. The hits kept coming. In 1979, he released "Farewell Party," a song that would become his signature. It featured an incredibly difficult, sustained closing high note that became his definitive musical calling card. The song resonated with fans who understood loss and longing, and Gene named his backing band after the song. The Farewell Party Band became a fixture of the country music circuit. Gene Watson had built a legend from nothing. He had survived poverty, hard labor, and years of rejection. But his greatest challenges were still ahead of him. The career decline and legal battles that followed would test him in ways that even the cotton fields never could. The lawsuit that derailed his career. After achieving massive chart hits like "Memories to Burn" with Epic Records, Watson sought a major career expansion by signing a new recording contract with Warner Brothers Records in 1988. The move was supposed to be the next logical step in a career that had already spanned 3 decades. Warner Brothers was one of the biggest labels in the world, and Watson believed that the partnership would propel him to new heights. He had proven himself as a consistent hitmaker, and the label was eager to capitalize on his loyal fan base. But the transition was complicated by a management decision that would prove disastrous. To steer this new era, Watson signed an exclusive management contract with Lib Hatcher, the highly aggressive and formidable industry manager who was also married to country superstar Randy Travis. Hatcher was known for her relentless advocacy of her clients. She had helped build Travis's career from the ground up, navigating the treacherous waters of the Nashville music industry with a fierce determination that earned her both respect and fear. Watson believed that she could do the same for him. Initially, the arrangement seemed promising. Hatcher secured a new record deal with Warner Brothers, and Watson's career appeared revitalized with the 1989 album Back in the Fire. The album received positive reviews and reminded the industry that Watson was still a force to be reckoned with. But the alliance was not built to last. In the latter half of 1990, during the production of his second Warner Brothers album, At Last, the relationship completely dissolved over major financial disputes. The exact details of the conflict remain unclear, but both Watson and Hatcher filed simultaneous, bitter lawsuits against each other regarding management fees and contract breaches. The legal war was ugly and public, and it threatened to destroy everything Watson had worked for. The intense legal battle locked Watson's career into an absolute standstill for roughly a full year. Under the strict injunctions of the active lawsuit, Watson was legally barred from signing any management, booking, or promotional deals with outside parties. He could not perform. He could not record. He could not move forward in any meaningful way. The man who had spent his entire life grinding and hustling was suddenly frozen in place, trapped by the very industry he had devoted his life to. The legal limbo was agonizing. He watched as opportunities passed him by, unable to take advantage of the momentum he had built. Warner Brothers Records executives were horrified by the ongoing public legal warfare. They had invested in Watson's talent, not in his legal troubles. The lawsuit was damaging their brand, and they had no interest in being associated with an artist who was embroiled in such a messy dispute. When the album At Last was finally released in 1991, they made a decision that would permanently alter the trajectory of their career. They dropped Watson from their roster. The man who had once been a fixture on the country charts was suddenly without a major label home. The abrupt termination from Warner Brothers completely broke his momentum. The legal and financial fallout permanently ended Watson's major label recording career. He had spent nearly 2 decades building a reputation as one of the most consistent and respected voices in country music. And in the span of a few months, it all came crashing down. The industry that had once embraced him had turned its back, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Forced to spend the rest of his career recording for small, underfunded independent labels such as Broadland International, Step One, RMG, and Intersound, Watson lost access to major country radio airplay. The songs he recorded on these smaller labels rarely made it to the charts, and his fan base, while loyal, could not sustain the momentum he had once enjoyed. The independent labels had limited promotional budgets, and they could not compete with the marketing machines of the major label. Watson's records were released to little fanfare, and the country radio stations that had once played his songs regularly no longer gave him the time of day. The lawsuit with Lib Hatcher did not just cost Watson his record deal, it cost him his place in the mainstream country music conversation. The man who had once stood alongside George Jones and Ray Price was now relegated to the margins, a victim of industry politics and legal warfare. It was a devastating blow, but Watson was not ready to quit. He had survived poverty, hunger, and hard labor. He had survived the rejection of the Nashville establishment. He would survive this too. However, the legal nightmare was only one of the tragedies that would test Gene Watson's resilience. The losses that were coming would cut far deeper than any lawsuit could. The personal tragedies that awaited him would shake him to his core and test his faith in ways that even the toughest years of his life never had. The tragedy that changed everything. Gene met his lifelong love, Mattie Louise Bivens, in the late 1950s during his teenage years in East Texas. She was the kind of woman who did not need the spotlight to shine. She was grounded, steady, and completely unimpressed by the trappings of fame. The young couple eloped and married in January 1961. At the time of their wedding, Gene was only 17 years old, and Mattie was just 15. They were young, really, barely old enough to understand what marriage meant, but they understood love, and that was enough to carry them through 6 decades of life together. Together they raised 2 children, a son named Gary Wayne Watson and a daughter named Terry Lynn Watson. The family was tight-knit, the kind of unit that weathered every storm together. Mattie remained completely out of the Hollywood limelight throughout their marriage. She did not seek attention or recognition. She acted as Watson's emotional anchor through poverty, fame, lawsuits, and health scares for 59 years. She was the rock that held everything together. In 2020, the world changed. The global health crisis swept across the planet, and no one was immune to its reach. Mattie Louise Bivens Watson passed away that year. Due to the strict mandates in place at the time, Watson was forced to mourn his wife of nearly 6 decades in profound physical and creative isolation. He could not hold a traditional funeral. He could not gather with friends and family to share his grief. He was alone, trapped in a silence that made the loss even harder to bear. The woman who had been by his side since he was a teenager was gone, and he could not even say goodbye properly. Just months later, on Tuesday, February 2, 2021, tragedy struck the family again. His 58-year-old daughter, Terry Lynn Watson Ware, passed away at the Paris Regional Medical Center in Paris, Texas. The cause of her death was officially ruled as severe medical complications resulting from a popular respiratory virus. Losing both his wife of 59 years and his only daughter within such a tight window broke Watson emotionally. He publicly stated that the era of immense grief nearly made him walk away from music entirely. He had always turned to songs to process pain, but this was different. This was a grief so profound that even music could not reach it. In the weeks following his daughter's death, Watson had a show booked. Everyone around him quietly assumed he would cancel. No one would have blamed him. Some losses do not fit neatly into a schedule. But Watson did not cancel. According to a story shared by someone close to his band, Watson stood backstage longer than usual that night. He was not pacing or warming up. He was not doing the small, familiar things performers often do before stepping into the lights. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes lowered, staring at the floor. He was waiting, perhaps, for someone to tell him he did not have to do this. But no one can release a father from grief. So he walked out on stage. The crowd rose because crowds had always risen for Gene Watson. The applause came the way it always came. Watson tipped his hat the way he had done for years, with that same quiet dignity fans knew so well. Then he opened the show with Farewell Party. Of all the songs in his catalog, he chose that one. Some people in the audience knew what he had just lived through. Some did not. He finished the song and the show. He did not turn the concert into a speech about his daughter. He simply stood there and sang, as if the only safe place to put the pain was inside the songs he had been trusted with for a lifetime. The losses that Gene Watson endured in such a short span of time would have broken a lesser man. But he kept going. He kept singing. He kept showing up for the fans who had loved him for decades. However, the tragedies were not over. The health battles he had faced earlier tested his body in ways that his spirit had already been tested. The medical nightmare he faced. In October 2000, while standing under the spotlights of the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, Watson began suffering terrifying, acute physical symptoms that severely threatened his mobility. The stage that had been his home for decades suddenly felt like a trap. He could not stand properly. His legs felt weak, and a wave of dizziness washed over him. His body was sending signals that something was deeply wrong. The audience, unaware of his distress, applauded as he finished his set. But those who knew him saw the fear in his eyes. Something was terribly wrong, and they knew they had to act fast. Rather than checking into an unfamiliar medical center in Nashville, his bandmates made a decision. They packed him into his tour bus and drove through the night straight back to Texas. The journey was long and grueling, but Watson wanted to be in a place where he trusted the doctors. He wanted to be close to home, close to his family, close to the people who would fight for him. The familiar roads of Texas gave him comfort, even as the unknown awaited him. Following a battery of emergency testing at a community clinic in Paris, Texas, Watson was transferred to a primary medical facility in Houston. There, specialists delivered the news that would change his life forever. He was diagnosed with advanced colon cancer. The disease had progressed further than anyone had expected, and the clock was ticking. The doctors told him that without immediate intervention, the cancer would spread and become untreatable. Watson immediately underwent emergency laparoscopic surgery to remove the malignant mass from his colon. The procedure was invasive and risky, but it was his only hope. The surgeons worked for hours, cutting out the cancer and praying that they had caught it in time. When Watson woke up from the anesthesia, he was told that the surgery had been successful. The tumor was gone, and the immediate threat had been neutralized. But the battle was far from over. While internet rumors frequently claim Watson was uninsured, historical records clarify that he faced a different nightmare. He was forced through an incredibly aggressive, mandated 6-month regimen of chemotherapy to fully satisfy specific medical protocol parameters required by his insurance policy. The treatments were brutal. They left him weak, nauseous, and completely drained of energy. The treatment pumped into his veins attacked not only the remaining cancer cells, but also his healthy tissue. His hair fell out. His appetite disappeared. His body withered. But he had no choice. If he wanted to survive, he had to endure the treatment regimen that was supposed to save him. To keep up with massive medical debts and overhead costs, Watson refused to cancel his schedule. He actively recorded full studio albums and traveled to tour dates while visibly sick from the chemotherapy treatment. The man who had once filled stadiums was now struggling to stand upright on stage. He would finish a performance, stumble off stage, and collapse into a chair, his body trembling from exhaustion. But he did not complain. He did not cancel. He showed up night after night because the fans had paid to see him, and he was not going to let them down. Watching Watson push his failing body to the brink to survive financially, fellow Texas country singer Mark Chestnut stepped in. Chestnut organized massive, star-studded benefit concerts to directly raise emergency cash to wipe out Watson's staggering out-of-pocket medical bills. The concerts brought together some of the biggest names in country music, all of them united by a single purpose: to save a legend. The money raised was enough to cover the costs that insurance would not pay, and Watson was able to relax again. Watson survived the cancer. He beat the odds and emerged from the nightmare with his life intact. But the medical battles left scars that would never fully heal. The man who had once been one of the strongest voices in country music had been humbled by a disease that did not care about fame or fortune. The journey was far from over, and the struggles that awaited him in his later years would test his resilience once again. But Gene Watson had never been a quitter. He had survived poverty, loss, legal battles, and cancer. He would survive whatever came next. How Gene Watson currently lives. The man who has been through so much was still standing, still singing, and still refusing to let the world break him. At 82 years old, he continues to live on his own terms, far from the Nashville machine that once turned its back on him. Decades before his cancer diagnosis, Watson had already made a decision that would save his voice. He realized that heavy drinking and substance use were eating away at his vocal cords. The years of performing in smoke-filled clubs had taken their toll, and he knew that if he wanted to keep singing, something had to change. He quit drinking alcohol completely in 1980, stopping cold turkey without rehab or medical supervision. A decade later, he quit smoking as well. The decision was not easy, but it was necessary. His voice was his instrument, and he was determined to protect it. Despite decades of performing in smoke-filled bars, a past of heavy drinking, and intense chemotherapy, medical examinations showed that Watson suffered zero residual structural damage to his larynx or upper respiratory tract. His voice remained intact, a medical miracle that his doctors could not fully explain. The voice that had defined his career was still as strong as ever, and fans who heard him sing today could hardly believe that he had been through so much. The treatments that had ravaged the rest of his body had spared his most precious gift. On Friday, July 13, 2007, while traveling to a show, Watson faced a different kind of danger. A broken axle shaft on his tour bus began spewing hot grease, triggering a massive engine fire. The flames spread quickly, and the situation was dire. The bus could have exploded at any moment, but Watson did not panic. Relying on his teenage auto body training, he rushed to the rear of the bus. He personally fought the fire for 30 minutes alongside his bandmates, using water bottles and soda cans to contain the grease fire until emergency crews arrived. The training he had received as a young mechanic had saved his life. The skills he had learned in those dusty junkyards had never left him. Late career validation finally came when Watson was inducted into the Texas Country Music Hall of Fame in 2002. The honor was meaningful, a recognition of his contributions to the music of his home state. This was followed by becoming an inaugural member of the Houston Music Hall of Fame in 2013. The city where he had struggled and hustled for so many years was finally recognizing his achievements. After being passed over by Nashville elites for nearly 50 years, Vince Gill formally inducted Watson as an official member of the Grand Ole Opry in 2020 at the age of 76. Watson later learned that Gill had been campaigning for his induction for 15 years, telling everyone who would listen that Watson was one of the greatest country singers of all time. The induction was a moment of justice, a recognition that should have come decades earlier. Standing on the stage of the Opry, Watson felt the weight of a lifetime of struggle lift off his shoulders. He had finally arrived. Despite holding 6 #1 country hits and being cited by George Strait as a primary influence, the Central Country Music Hall of Fame in Nashville has controversially still never inducted Watson. The snub is a source of frustration for his fans, who have launched petitions and campaigns to get him in. But Watson does not let the lack of recognition define him. He knows what he has accomplished, and he does not need a building to validate his legacy. Now, 82 years old, Watson completely rejects Nashville living. He lives permanently in Houston, Texas, where he still owns and actively works on classic cars inside his private auto body shop named The Toy Shop. The shop is his sanctuary, a place where he can escape the pressures of the music industry and do the work he has loved since he was a teenager. Even at his age, he can be found with his hands covered in grease, his mind focused on the task at hand. The shop is not a hobby. It is a lifeline, a connection to the simpler days of his youth. To this day, Watson refuses to lower the keys of his songs. He tours America, performing 14 Karat Mind and Farewell Party in the exact same high vocal key he recorded them in back in his 20s. At 82 years old, his voice remains as powerful as ever. He does not make excuses for his age. He does not ask for sympathy. He simply walks onto the stage and sings the songs that made him a legend. Gene Watson's life at 82 is not the fairy tale that his fans might have imagined. He has endured poverty, loss, legal battles, cancer, and the death of his wife and daughter. But he is still standing. He is still singing. He is still working on cars in his shop. The tragedies he has faced would have broken a lesser man, but Gene Watson has never been a lesser man. He is a survivor, and his story is far from over. What's your favorite Gene Watson song? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.